Yeah, Namaste Vedvir Arya ji.
Namaste to all. Today we will discuss about the epoch of the Shaka era. In fact, Indian ancient chronology has many mysteries. One of them is the epoch of the Shaka era. The epoch has been debated since last 200 years of the Indian historical research, but still there are many facts which have been ignored since last 200 years. So I am going to present on the my research what I have done since last 2 years. So I will go through the presentation. Fleet and Kielhorn, these were the two stalwarts of the 19th century. They headed the archaeology department of India, as well as they were the civil servants of British regime. Fleet and Kielhorn, they have verified more than 370 references of Shaka era given in various epigraphs. Then Kielhorn found out that 140 dates only satisfactorily can be explained in the epoch of 78 AD. But there are more than 70 dates which cannot be explained. There are 30 dates are doubtful, and more than 100 dates have no verifiable details. So if you see, only some 60% or 70% of the dates only can be explained. But out of 140 dates, there are certain dates which have been mentioned only Saka-nripa-Kalatita era, whereas the 70 dates Saka-nripa-Kala. So it indicates that Saka-nripa-Kala may be a different epoch, and Saka-nripa-Kalatita will have some different epoch. There are certain commonly accepted notions about the Shaka era that it has commenced only in 78 AD. And initially, this era was referred to as coronation of Shaka king, whereas later it has been mentioned as Shakanta, Saka-nripa-Kalatita. From 12th century or around 9th century onwards, the epoch of 78 AD was referred to as Shalivahana era. Actually, there are certain inscriptions mention about solar eclipses as well as lunar eclipses, but the dates given in the inscriptions don't tally with the occurrence of eclipses. Therefore, the Western scholars and colonial historians have rejected those inscriptions as forgeries. Like there is one inscription like Pimpleneer grant of Western Chalukyas. This inscription is dated in Shaka 310. Since the date leads to 388 AD, that time in 4th century there were no Chalukyas as per the modern chronology. Therefore, they rejected this grant as a forgery. But only accepting the epoch of Shaka era as 78 AD, that leads to so many inconsistencies. 75% of the irregular dates refer to the epoch of the coronation of Shaka king, whereas 75% of the irregular solar eclipses also refer to the epoch of coronation of Shaka king. So now this gives that how can a king is referring to some invisible solar eclipses, or he is issuing or somebody is forging the certain dates with the invisible solar eclipses. If we consider that certain inscriptions are forgery, then what was the motive, or why should we accept them as a forgery? Actually, the concept of forgeries has been introduced by Fleet to conveniently reject or accept some epigraphic evidence so that he can establish his understanding of the Indian chronology. The epigraphic and literary evidences refer to various Sanskrit references like Saka-nripa Rajyabhisheka Samvatsara, Saka-nripa-Kalatita. So these clearly indicate that they are two different epochs, like Shaka-varsheshu Atiteshu, Shaka-bhupakala, Shakendra-kala, whereas other side they call about Shakabde Tata, Shakendre Atigate, Saka-nripa-Kalatita Samvat. These inscriptions refer to a different epochs. Like whether Atita means only elapsed or it has a different meaning also. In Sanskrit, there is a Dvitiya Tatpurusha and Panchami Tatpurusha and Saptami Tatpurusha. In Dvitiya Tatpurusha, when Atita used, it means beyond the era of Shaka King, means beyond the when Shaka era ended, thereafter the commencement of a particular epoch that refers to in Dvitiya Tatpurusha. If it is used in Panchami or Saptami Tatpurusha, then the Atita means from the epoch of the Shaka King. Like Surat and Kauthum plates, Saka-nripa-Kalatita Samvatsara Shateshu Atiteshu. So if we observe this statement, there is a twice use of Atita. If Saka-nripa-Kalatita, if it is elapsed, then why again Atiteshu has been used at the end? In the Somadeva Suri's Yashastilaka Champu, again same thing. Saka-nripa-Kalatita Samvatsara Shateshu Gateshu. Then Lakshmanvati of Udayana, it also mentions Atiteshu Shakantataha Varsheshu, Shakantataha Varsheshu Atiteshu. Again, the Madhurantaka Devas Rajapura grant mentions to Saka-nripa-Kalatita Samvat. It means Saka-nripa-Kala Samvat and Saka-nripa-Kalatita Samvat both are different. They cannot be identical. If you look at the Bhaskaracharya Siddhanta Shiromani, he clearly mentions Nanda Drindu Gunasthatha Saka-nripa Syante Kaler Vatsaraha with the use of Shakabdanvitaha. In case 3179 years have been elapsed since the beginning of Kali Yuga, then he mentions including of Shakaira years. If Shakaira started from 3179 Kali Yuga or 78 AD, there is no point of saying Shakabdanvitaha because that was the starting point of Shakabda, which clearly indicates that the existence of Shakabda or Shakaira prior to 78 AD. Similarly, Lallacharya he was the author of Shishyadhivriddhida Tantra. He also refers to similar statement the way Bhaskaracharya has given, and Mallikarjuna Suri, who wrote a commentary on Shishyadhivriddhida Tantra, he clearly mentioned that 3179 Kali years are elapsed, including the years of Kali Yuga. In case the Kali Yuga is being introduced from 3179 Kali Yuga, then there is no way we can say that including the years of Kali Shakaira. So it clearly indicates that an epoch of Shakaira existed prior to the epoch of 3179 Kali Yuga. So this all the reference of literary and epigraphic evidences lead to a one doubt whether Saka-nripa-Kalatita era and Saka-nripa-Kala era both are identical or different. Let us verify certain details of Chalukyas, the inscriptions of early Chalukyas. A copper plate found in Kurtakoti, that is near to the Badami, it clearly mentions Trimshottara Panchashateshu Shakavarsheshu Atiteshu Vaishakha Jeshtamasa Madhyamamavasyayam Bhaskara Dine Rohinyarikshe Madhyanna Kale Mahadevatayor Ubhayor Vrishabharashau Tasmin Vrishabharashau Surya Grahane Sarvagrasi Bhute. So this statement clearly gives certain verifiable details, like the total solar eclipse occurred on the new moon date of Vaishakha month, Then the eclipse ended during the noon time, and sun and moon were in a Vrishabha Rashi, means a Taurus sign. Then moon was in Rohini Nakshatra. These details can only be explained if we take the solar eclipse occurred on 9th May 53 BC. What I have done last 3000 years, 1500 BC to 1500 AD, if we select the total solar eclipses occurred in northern Karnataka, there are 10 solar eclipses occurred, 13th August 1416 BC, and the last 10th solar eclipse occurred 9th December 1322 AD. But out of these 10 solar eclipses occurred in 3000 years, there is only one solar eclipse that occurred on 9th May 53 BC. Is the total solar eclipse occurred in Vaishakha Masa and in Vrishabha Rashi, and the day perfectly tallies with the Rohini Nakshatra, and this eclipse started around 9:04 am and ended at 11:545 am. It means exactly this solar eclipse ended at the time of noon, means around 12 o'clock. Since Indian astronomers as well as Indian people used to celebrate after the eclipse, so normally eclipse time was not auspicious, but the time after the eclipse was an auspicious. So this 53 BC gives us a clear indication that the epoch of coronation of Shaka king commenced in 583 BC. You have to simply add 530 years because the kurtakoti copper plates mention that the king has issued this copper plate in 530 Shaka era. If you add 530 years to 53 BC, it leads to 583 BC. So there is a clear evidence that the epoch of Shaka era commenced in 583 BC. Modern historians calculate this 530 as 608 and 609 AD. During that time, one solar eclipse occurred, though that is a total solar eclipse occurred on 20th April 608 AD. But that solar eclipse was not at all visible in India. Even the solar eclipse was somewhere near to between Antarctica and Australia. Another stone inscription found in Shimoga district. It refers to Shaka year 861, Chaitra Pratipada and Valaya Grahana. Valaya Grahana means annular eclipse. Why I am more focused on total and annular eclipses? Because these are the strongest astronomical evidences. Because these are rarest astronomical, these occur very in a 1000 years, once or twice such eclipses will occur. So, in the year of 861 Shaka year, a Valaya Grahana means an annular eclipse occurred in Shimoga district on Chaitra Pratipada. If we calculate from the 583 BC 861, then 277 AD was the 861st year of Shaka era. The annular eclipse occurred on 20th February 277. The day was Chaitra Pratipada. Actually, the new moon means Amavasya ended around 11 am and Pratipada started around exact same time, and the annular eclipse ended 1139 am. Means the annular eclipse ended when Pratipada started, and Pratipada almost was 40 minutes. The duration of the Pratipada from the starting to end point of the annular eclipse. It means since the eclipse ended on Pratipada, that's why the author of the inscription is mentioning that the solar eclipse occurred on Chaitra Pratipada. Historians identified 9th February 938, there was another annular solar eclipse occurred, but that was on Magha Amavasya, not Chaitra Pratipada. So that cannot be accepted, but modern historians somehow accepted this date. There is another copper plates of Pulakesin, This was on 532, 534, Shakaira of 534. The Pulakesin has issued these copper plates on Bhadrapada Amavasya. If you calculate 534 from 583 BC, that comes 49 BC. The 21st August 49 BC, an annular eclipse occurred, and that is perfectly visible in the northern Karnataka. Of course, the entire India, this eclipse was visible. And this eclipse is the perfect match to the verifiable details given in the Hyderabad plate of Pulakesin 2. But the same eclipse has been identified by the historians on 23rd July 603 ED. But if we calculate from 78 AD, 534th year would be 612, not 603. So what historians done? They simply distorted the date of 534 and made that there was some error of 1 year, so added and then accepted 535 elapsed. This is nothing but a forgery by the modern historians. Another copper plate inscription found in Nellore district that refers to Shaka year 582 and on Sravana Amavasya. And this inscription mentions to the 6th Regnal era of Vikramadityal and perfectly matches with the 1 BC, 31st July. The solar eclipse was perfectly visible on the geography of Nellore. This date also cannot be accepted, cannot be explained in the Shalivahana era or 78 AD because the date is 13th July and 660 AD, but the day was Ashadha Amavasya, not Sravana Amavasya. There are certain more copper plates found. Those refer to Saka-nripa-Kalatita era, but the Shaka year given is much earlier than the inscriptions of Early Chalukyas. Like Pimple grant of Satyashraya Deva is dated in 310 Shaka year. That leads to 388 AD. In the modern chronology, it is impossible to place Chalukyas in the 4th century, but that copper plate mentioned to a Surya Grahana that perfectly matches with the 18th August 388 AD, but historians rejected it as a forgery. Similar way, there are 4 more copper plates found in northern Karnataka. They refer to a king Vinayaditya, and the years given are 516 to 522 Shaka years. So those lead to 594 AD to 600 AD. But these dates are absolutely in violation of the modern chronology. And moreover, these inscriptions written in Nagari characters, whereas the inscriptions of early Chalukyas have been written in the other south script characters, because that was the archaic Telugu Kannada inscriptions. Archaic Telugu Kannada script existed prior to Nagari characters. There are many other solar and lunar eclipses I have verified. I found that more than 80% or 90% of eclipses we can explain in the epoch of 583 BC, whereas we cannot explain these things in 78 AD. Similarly, the lunar eclipses also, but there is a problem when we check with the lunar eclipses, because every year either once or twice lunar eclipses are occurring. So there is a more probability that you can find a lunar eclipse which may link with the whatever the date you are looking for. So there is a more probability to find a lunar eclipse in time. So lunar eclipses are weaker verifiable details in comparison with the solar eclipses. So we have to consider solar eclipses as the strongest evidences. Therefore, based on the analysis what I have presented till now, that leads to that Shakaira and Shalivahana era are not identical. Saka-nripa-Kalatita commenced in 583 BC, whereas Saka-nripa-Kalatita era commenced in 78 AD. There is another inscription of Hisse Borala inscription. This inscription refers to Vakataka king Devasena. This inscription refers to Shaka year 380, that is around 204 and 203 BC, starting from 583 BC epoch. This inscription refers to the position of Saptarshis in Phalguni Nakshatra, Uttara Phalguni Nakshatra. It is well known that during the reign of Yudhishthira, Vriddha and Varahamihira mentioned that Saptarshis were in Magha. If we calculate from there onwards, so this Uttara Phalguni Nakshatra was perfectly in the 276 to 176 BC. Means in that every 100 years, the Saptarshis change one nakshatra that has been established in the ancient period. So astronomically, it's not true, but for calendar purposes, Indians have always followed the forward motion of Saptarshis, and they covered the chronological history referring to the calendar of Saptarshis. There are many other inscriptions which have been identified as the contemporary kings, but actually the Sanskrit verbs used as babhuva. Babhuva is used in lit lakara. This cannot be used for the reigning king. This can only be used to refer an historical personality, not a contemporary person. Jyotirvidabharana of Kalidasa mentions a date of Kali Yuga 3068. This leads to 34 BC. And Kalidasa also mentions the Shaka year 445. If the epoch of Shakaira has commenced in 78 AD, then how Kalidasa referring 3068 Kali Yuga year as well as Shaka 445 year, 445 year? It is impossible until unless we have to accept that an epoch of Shakaira existed prior to the Kali epoch of 3068. It means the total solar eclipse occurred during the Vikramadityal Chalukyas that refers to 53 BC. That perfectly gives that the epoch of Shakaira commenced in 583 BC. There is another astronomical work called Yavanajatakam, was translated, that's Pujidhwaja. He was the Yavana king who translated Yavanajatakam into a Sanskrit. So this text referred to a Shaka year 56, and it mentions that on the day sun and moon were at Mesha Rashi. So this and this Yavanajatakam follows a solar yuga of 165 years. So this yuga calculations, what I have done, I have taken from 583 BC onwards. From 583, if we take 56th year of Shaka year, that is the 528 BC. From the 528 BC, they have reset as the epoch of the Yuga of 165 years. So we can calculate these Yugas, and perfectly the sun and moon were in Aries on that day, and they were either Ashwini or Bharani Nakshatra. Another inscription, it is very interesting that Hoysala Kings of this inscriptions refers to Shaka year 2027. If we had 78 years more in this one, then 2105 AD. How can a historic dynasty of Karnataka is issuing an inscription using some futuristic date? The 2105 is even today almost 90 years away from the today's date. So what historians have distorted it and mentioned is 1027 because this may, but it is visibly, it perfectly leads to 2027 only. It cannot be distorted to 1027 because if you have to do, then you have to do other two also. Then you have to say 1017 instead of 1027. Moreover, the details given in the inscriptions cannot be proven something like that kind of the Valaya king never existed 1027 Shaka. So this inscription clearly indicates that an epoch of 583 BC were existed and the calendar of Shakaira of 583 BC was in vogue till 15th century in Karnataka. Another inscription of Vijayanagara Kings mentions Shaka 1975. If we had 78 years in that one, then 2053 AD. This is also futuristic date. So this date cannot be linked with the 78 AD. Undoubtedly, this date has been mentioned in the epoch of 583 BC. Similarly, another inscription of Hoysala Kings dated in 1919. If he had 78 years, then 1997 AD. It means a Hoysala king was ruling in Karnataka in 1997 AD. But that time some Congress leader was ruling in Karnataka. So, an epoch of 583 BC was in vogue in Karnataka in the 15th and 14th centuries. And most probably after 15th century, that epoch has been forgotten. Only 78 AD only came into practice later. Actually, why 78 AD epoch came into an existence? Indian astronomers were following the Kali epoch since 1000 BC onwards, or during Parashara or Aryabhatta, the time of Aryabhatta, they were following the Kali epoch. That time, they have assumed that all planets were in conjunction in Mesha Rashi somewhere 18th or 17th February 3102 BC. But actually, that conjunction was not a perfect conjunction. Therefore, all astronomical calculations were going slightly wrong whenever they want any all-round calculations. Due to these problems, Indian astronomers were in search for a perfect epoch. Then they found an epoch in 78 AD. On 1st April 78 AD, Jupiter, Sun and Moon were in a perfect conjunction in Mesha Rashi and Ashwini Nakshatra. And moreover, it was very, if we take equatorial grid, it perfectly occurs between 0 to 5 degree also. So this was the perfect conjunction from where we can start all calculations very accurately. Due to this reason, Indian astronomers selected 78 AD as an epoch and refer to it as Saka-nripa-Kalatita or Shakantaira, or from the death of Shaka king. So this way, the new epoch has been born, but unfortunately, Indians started referring to 78 AD also as Shaka. That led to a lot of confusion. So, based on this entire analysis, we can firmly establish that Shaka and Shaka-Kalatita are not identical. Shaka era commenced in 583 BC, whereas the Shaka-Kalatita era commenced in 78 AD. The Shaka era was introduced by Shaka king Chaitra in 583 BC on his coronation in Ujjain, whereas Shaka-Kalatita era was purely an astronomical epoch, not introduced by any king. This epoch has been introduced by Indian astronomers in 78 AD only for the purposes all-round astronomical calculations. That's why Al-Biruni mentions that 78 AD epoch was mostly used by only Indian astronomers. During 8th and 9th centuries, Sri Vaishnavas speculated that the Shaka era was introduced from the birth of Pratisthana king Shalivahana. That's why the name of Shalivahana got linked with this epoch. Initially, Shalivahana was linked with the 583 BC also. Then later the name has been again linked with the 78 AD. That's why the 78 AD was referred to as Shaka, also Shalivahana also. But actually, these two are different epochs. They cannot be identical. If we take Shaka and Shalivahana as different epochs, then we have to reset many ancient Indian eras. Like Shaka, Shalivahana, today we take it at 78 AD. Actually, Shaka in 583 BC, whereas Shalivahana in 78 AD. Then Krita and Malavagana and Vikramayira, all three epochs lead to 57 BC as per modern historians. But actually, Krita, Malavagana or Kartikadi Vikrama commenced in 719 BC, whereas Chaitradi Vikrama started in 57 BC. Gupta and Vallabhi, modern historians clubbed together and said the epoch has commenced in 319 BC, 319 AD, whereas Gupta and Vallabhi both are not identical. Gupta era started 335 BC, whereas Vallabhi era started in 319 AD. Similarly, Kalachuri Chedi year also 249 AD. This is the epoch has been fixed by the modern historians, but in reality, the epoch of Kalachuri and Chedi era commenced in 402, 403, 402 BC. Similarly, Sriharsha era, according to modern historians, 606 AD, whereas Alberoni clearly mentions that Sriharsha era commenced in 457 BC. So, if you look at the epochs of various ancient Indian eras, there is a clear chronological anomaly of 661 years. This is the reason entire Indian chronology got distorted and various concoctions have been embedded with the Indian history. So my study on the epoch of Shaka and Shalivahana era clearly establishes that in Indian chronological history there is an anomaly of 661 years. This can be perfectly solved if we accept that Shaka era commenced in 583 BC, whereas Shalivahana era commenced in 78 AD. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for stating 583 BC is the Shaka era. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for your time.